This is a presentation of SBE 15, New York City.
So, all right. So I'm going to kick this off here. I thought this was important because these are the discussions that we need to have with ourselves and with our teams now, because it's still nice outside. And I'm sure, as everybody on this meeting has noted, in the Northeast, and Keith will assume that Chicago is having a similar situation with the weather. It's nice out, and the leaves are beautifully falling off the trees, and everybody's having pumpkin spice lattes and apple cider donuts, and we're enjoying being outdoors. Well, about 2 months from now, sometime sooner, that changes. And this is the time, not 2 months from now or 3 months from now, when there's a problem, to prepare your site. And one thing I've noticed from doing on-call work is that these discussions are not happening. And by the way, this is not a discussion that should be happening just at the engineering level. This is a discussion that really needs to happen at the station management level. So for people that are working with stations, even if it's just you have contract stations, or there's that little 20 water community station that you talk to twice a year when they forget to file their EAS forms, the little high school station that calls every once in a while because somebody unplugs the barracks box. Yeah, this is a conversation you can have, because first of all, it is a justification in terms of billing for preventative maintenance, and we're not trying to overbill our clients, but this is a justified expense. This should be budgeted for. And second of all, these little small things that take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes will save hours and hours of headaches later on. Cody, I know from experience with you, we had to do a thing down in Philly, you and I, one very, very cold, dark night out of the tower at ATU, and you were in front of me bombing across the transmitter field in your car, and
In Philly, yes.
yeah, I mean, thinking to myself, this is good that we're doing this because, this is solving a problem, but geez, we could have done this 3 months ago, and we wouldn't be freezing and having to wear gloves. And it just, you think about the kind of things that, you can do when the weather's nice, and we don't want to do them when there's snow on the ground, when there's ice. And I'm going to review the reasons why for that. Once we get through this, by the way, there's a goal here. This isn't just Andy talking and doing a presentation. I'm going to take the information that's in the slideshow and prepare a list. And Cody, if you'd be so kind, if you could document anything that gets brought up while we're having this discussion, because I'm speaking to a panel of folks who've been through this all already. If there are items that come up that I left out of this, I won't feel bad. You can yell at me, give me a little paddling. But more importantly, I'd like to create a checklist that we can then condense, catalog, and then send off to our friends at National for distribution among the chapter membership. Because I think being
Fair
proactive
enough.
in this case, yeah, I knew you'd be up to the challenge. Not that you haven't been bogged down with writing and reading all week, but we'll just add this to your busy schedule. But I think this is
Better than grading.
exactly. I think this is just important because as we want to, you use the correct word, grading. We almost want to be able to grade ourselves and how we're doing, and a self inspection checklist, similar to we do with everything else with station tasks and FCC tasks. A maintenance checklist will really save time and money. And boy, isn't that a nice thing to bring back to the management for the next budgetary cycle, when you can say, because of the engineering department's proactiveness, we actually were able to reduce costs. General managers love that. I think everybody here's had to have that discussion, and we don't like having them when it doesn't go our way. So with that, I will proceed. Obviously, look, wintertime is the two harshest times for any broadcast facility are the dead of winter and the dead of summer. Summertime and heat come with their own set of challenges that we really don't necessarily have to worry about with this time of the year, with winter approaching. But I think with winter, there are additional safety issues we need to take into consideration. And we'll cover those in just a moment. As we all know, the cold, moisture, and power instability are not friends of a broadcast environment or a broadcast air chain. So we need to just always keep that in the back of our mind, that winter can introduce factors that are unfriendly to broadcast equipment. And those factors can become even more pronounced when your building has a structural issue that you're not aware of, or you find out about at the time of incident. So just keeping an eye on all this stuff is really important. And obviously, we all know what our goals here: keep the stations on the air, keep the programming going. A station that's off the air is not generating revenue. And by the way, if you could find me a station that can be off the air and generate revenue, I mean, let me know because I want to invest in it. All right, count me in because that doesn't seem to be a thing, and I know that that's pretty much our priority number one: keep the station on the air. I don't think they really nothing else other than that really ever comes up in discussion of the can you keep it on the air and make sure the paperwork's filed. Those are our two core tasks. Obviously, we know wintertime brings power outages and access challenges. Now, we think about access challenges. That means getting to sites. Now, this is not generally an issue in places like Manhattan, where you take an elevator in a heated building to a transmitter room, and then maybe you have to go out on the roof and take a look at something. But for the most part, these are not difficult places to access. But a hilltop, and like Bud can tell you, Mount Beacon can be extremely treacherous. And whether or not you even have a vehicle that can get up there, or you need to contract a vehicle, or we were hearing a wonderful story from Kirk Harnack where he had to take a helicopter to a transmitter site. Then the helicopter couldn't get him, and they had to walk down the hill. I mean, it was like these are things that we don't necessarily get properly compensated for, but we do have to kind of think like James Bond sometimes to get to limited access sites. I know personally, I've had a few close calls careening down the side of unpaved roads and ice storms, and I've said to myself, "Is it worth it?" And I say, "Well, hopefully, the company has insurance; they can pay for my car when I flip it over." Um, that's really part of the access challenge. But we also think about physical access challenges. Okay, once you get to the site, can you get out of the car and get to the building? There's one site that I have, WPAT. We have a little, I call it the noise generator, but there's like a 99-watt translator up on top of Tower One at WPAT. And can I tell you that even though it's in a field, and the WPAT building is about 200 feet away from the ATU, there's a big high uh, mound that goes over a water main. I can't get over that thing in the wintertime. And it's not because, well, it partially is because I'm just fat and out of shape, but the other reason is because it's just very difficult to climb up that when there's ice and snow. Deep snow over a foot, you really can't get up over that thing. And if you do actually risk getting your foot stuck on the other side of the culvert. So that's not only an access issue, but a safety issue as well. Because nobody's going to hear you behind that building. Nobody's coming to get you, and you could freeze to death out there. And you don't want to have that happen. If it can happen to Jerry Rafferty, it can happen to you. Obviously, we know about HVAC failures. We think it's wintertime. Why would we care about things being too cold? Well, as we all know, some things do not react well to cold weather, and there are reasons to have your sites heated. We don't always want everything to be brick cold. I mean, we think of the electronics probably like it, but there are gaskets, there are other moving parts that don't necessarily want to be cold. If you have an indoor generator, for example, it might not have the correct motor oil in it. So you want to take into consideration that there are hydraulic systems, other things that don't necessarily want to be getting sub-zero temperatures. And as we all know, in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, Pennsylvania, we have seen sub-zero temperatures over the last couple of years, even though we have global warming. Funny how that works. Winters do get very cold. It's Mother Nature. We don't have control over that. The third thing is limited staff access. Now, we've all been in positions where we have been on vacation. I love to go away during the month of January for like a week and a half. That is my off the grid week. But if I need to be summoned by the management, so be it. However, we're all very good at talking people through fixing things, but it's very difficult to talk a staff member into driving to a remote tower site when they've never even been there before, trying to find that hidden driveway that's not plowed, getting the gate open, the combination lock, you don't have the right combination. It's not changed. They don't know the alarm code. And you got to talk them through all this over a cell phone when you might be on a Hawaiian island enjoying some time with your wife or your family. So we have to think about those things. Deploying somebody out to a site on a nice spring day is one thing. Take a ride 45 minutes to Millerton, go, unplug the Nortel, plug it back in, problem solved. That person's a hero. You got to do this at 2 o'clock in the morning in February when the staff member you can barely see at night. That's going to be a problem. So you don't want to have a reason to put yourself in that situation. And obviously, as we know, preventative at PM will always save downtime and repair costs, which makes us look a lot better. We just don't want to have that happen. Okay, you guys know all about me. I'll blow past this slide, but obviously I have a full-time job, two part-time jobs, and a number of freelance clients, all based around radio. So I guess I could speak to this topic, as well as a ton of research in this particular area. Cody, I threw this picture in for you. You know who that is, right, Cody?
Taylor or Comrex.
Comrex, the raccoon. Now
Yes.
he's cute, right? That's a cute guy, cute little fella right there. What's the problem with this picture, Cody? Where is Comrex that we don't want him?
Accessing our transmitter site through a HVAC duct.
That's right. The
Oh,
raccoon is inside the building, coming through I guess it's the chimney that had its cement mortar had chipped away over time. Our
She
little
also
transmitter.
had 4 kids living in the building as well.
oh,
Yeah. So it's wonderful. And Lori, I think I heard you just say, "Oh, the problem is with
yeah.
little kids. You know what happens with mama raccoons and little baby raccoons, right? They get very protective of those little baby raccoons. Now, luckily for us, mommy over
Yeah,
here was
that's right.
more of a sightseer, but we did come in. I came into the room, and you can always tell when somebody's not supposed to be there. I kind of felt the presence first. I smelled our friend, certainly a very distinct odor, having a raccoon inside your building. And then you hear what sounds like an Ewok going, "Brrr," a little Wookiee, and you go, "Oh, hello." So, winterization of a building is very important because when it gets cold outside, warm blooded animals like to go find heat. And as we all know, especially AM sites, ATUs and transmitters put out a lot of heat. So, the animals, well, they know how to find warmth. They are
Mhm.
survivalists. So, they will look for any reason to go inside. You couple that hot transmitter or blowout duct with a garbage can with a couple of half a sandwiches that the last crew left in there, some pizza crusts, and that is where they want to be. And they will find anything that they can find to make a nest out of and raise their family in your transmitter room. And they love to chew on control wires. They definitely love chewing on control wires. I guess it's happy tastings for them. So we don't want any of that to happen because that comes with a host of problems. So we had to evict our friend. We served him with a 2-week notice from a, local extermination company, and she had to go elsewhere. But then she did actually come back, even though she was brought far, far away. She returned to the
Wow.
site. Guess she
Wow.
really liked the waterfront property out at WMCA. Regardless, then we had to bring her even further away. We haven't seen her since. But they will come back. And just, you might think you know how to keep these guys out. You put that metal piece in there and you seal it up real good with Flex Seal because it'll keep a boat from sinking in the middle of the water. Well, guess what? They'll chew through almost anything. There's a certain art to keeping the rodents and mammals out. So if you don't want to take on the responsibility of doing it, or you think you're going to do a hack job on it, or if it's just too much to deal with, talk to the general manager and call your local extermination company. It's going to save 10 times more money than you're gonna spend on the initial service call. What could be about $500 or $600 will save you $5,000 or $6,000, especially if that animal crawls into your power amp, shorts something out, blows the transmission line. I have been in that experience and it's not fun. And by the way, it was all preventable. Find the hole, seal it up. Or if you don't want to do it, have somebody else do it. Okay, so we're going to focus on these two separate areas: transmitter site and studio site. You're going to say like studio winterization. We're inside. Well, there's the parts of this that come with that too. Okay, what do we see wrong in this picture? What's wrong with this picture? Anybody? Don't all shout it out at once.
The weatherproofing is just like not connected fully to the satellite dish.
It's not the weatherproofing. It's the insulation, the heating, the thermal electrical insulation. Parts of it have fallen off. So this is a problem. And we know what'll happen if your insulation is not connected properly. Those wires will short out, and you could start a fire. And because the remote control for the heating system is 25 miles away in Lower Manhattan, we might not even know what's going on until the fire department comes and there's a rooftop fire on top of the beautiful Art Deco WMCA building. So we don't want to have that happen. But by getting up on the roof and taking a look when there's no snow out, you can identify that problem. So that problem has been corrected. But again, it requires getting up there and taking a look. So always go and even look for the areas that you might not to look at: rooftops and behind corners, down those little narrow passageways. Maybe take a look up onto the cable ladder, see if anything's going on up there. It's very important to do that. I only caught this because I was looking at the HVAC system, and while I was up there, I said, "Oh, look at that!" While you're up on the roof too, feel free to look at the roof because you might see roofing coming up, especially with those flat rolled roofs. Those guys like to lift up and come rolling off or peeling off, and then what's under the flat rolled roof could be the old roof of the building that they just rolled on top of, or it could be nothing, or the substructure, the or sublayer of the roofing material, which will saturate with water, rot out the plywood sheeting, and now you got a really expensive roof repair. So hop up on the roof, take a look. Takes about 5 minutes. Walk around, see if there's any sponginess. You'll know that the roof is solid. It's going to hold the snow, especially when the water pools. That's the other problem. Uneven roofs will pool water. Water creates weight. Water needs to go down. Water likes to come down, sometimes directly over your transmitter. And I saw that at a site in Puerto Rico. As a matter of fact, I should have thrown that picture in here, but that was and ended up losing one of the transmitters. They had to put a tarp over the other one, and it was just an absolute mess. But as they said, I see, I see. We know about ATUs. ATUs, we don't think about how important it is to keep them dry. We want to keep the temperature somewhat stable. In some cases, this is not practical, but in places that have an ATU that is inside of a structure, throw a dehumidifier in there. If it's getting really, really cold, you might want to consider a small space heater, just because you don't want those coils moving around. You don't want things to expand and contract. AM sites don't like that. And you wonder why your readings are all getting all crazy, as Mr. Stagnito told me one time. Well, because the coil, she's very delicate and she gets very unhappy when the temperatures change. Just like, my wife's the same way. So I gotta keep that the wife rule. Generators. We know all about generators. Generators tend to not want to run when you need them the most, because you start it up when it's nice outside. You go, oh, this is great. Generator's running. And then for 6 months, you forget about it. And what happens when it gets cold outside? Well, the fuel turns to gel if there's water in it, or there's impurities, or if it's crappy diesel. So you want to go make sure that generator's running when you can get to the site. Make sure you're going up there once or twice, during the winter, maybe even more frequently if it's something that a site that's has more impact, or a higher revenue site. Make sure that generator runs. I know I do. We do a gen test once a month at all the sites, each generator, constantly checking fuel. And by the way, this was a reminder for me. I got to do my rooftop generator at 111 Broadway. So I kind of forgot about it this year because we've been so busy with everything else. And I went, oh, I got to go do that. I want to make sure there's diesel in that tank, because if we have a power outage, that's a big tank, and we don't want to have to try to get an emergency load delivered up there. That would be very unfun, especially in the snow. UPS and batteries. My, how many times have we gone to a site and the UPS has blown up and the thing's just hanging in the bypass state, and we don't realize it. You're not going to find out if you have a bad UPS until you do have a power outage, and either your generator transfers over or doesn't start at all, and then something doesn't come back. And that little 3 or 4 seconds of time between the generator rolling, firing up, and the power being off, all of those things that don't have static switches in them, or are rebootable devices, and everything seems to be a rebootable device these days. Well, that could mean a 3 or 4 or 5 minute off-air time, or if it's one of those things where well, this site I have to restart the router first and then the modem, but this site you have to restart the modem first and then the router and then the remote control. Well, if you don't remember that sequence, or you forgot about it, or there's that little switch that sometimes doesn't come back at all, and you have to unplug it and plug it back in, you're going to be stuck, because you're not going to be able to get out there. The UPS definitely took a dump on you, and you're not having a good day. So just check your UPS batteries. And that just comes from every time you're at the site. Most of the time they give you a little beep. Sometimes they don't. So it's always good to check those out. And as a rule of thumb, if you think they're past the point of expiration, just change them even before you get an alarm. We like to go about 2.5, 3 years with UPS batteries. If it's a higher load site or a bigger UPS, you might get a little more time out of them. If it's a smaller UPS, you might get less time. I know I've seen those little UPSs go for a year and a half, and if the load's too high, those batteries will just conk out and you're done. So we don't want to have a loss of performance. We lose thousands of dollars because of a $35 battery you could buy on Amazon. So let's not have that. We all know about feed lines, ground lines, and de-icers. So we have obviously our de-icing situation picture that we have on the left here. That's clearly was a problem. Feed lines, we know about water getting into feed lines, and water, when it gets cold, likes to expand. So we want to check for fraying in the feed lines. We want to make sure the feed lines are happy. We want to make sure that the mounts and anchoring for the feed lines and those fasteners are not moving around, because if they start blowing around in the wind, they get loose. Once water gets into that line, I think we all know how much it costs to replace a feed line, especially if it's buried. And if it's any great length, we're looking at, it could be a $50,000-$60,000 job, more for the issues going up the tower. I know Bud and I dealt with a situation last spring with an antenna that looked like we weren't sure if it was getting water in it. But then it turned out that the feed line had been compromised, and it was one of these things where somebody had actually put electrical tape around the top of it, because that's going to keep the pressure in and keep the moisture out. Yeah, no good. Didn't work, and the site kept going up and down and up and down and up and down. And then one day it just finally went down, and it didn't come back. So that was an issue. Luckily, it was not a commercial station, but we treated it like it was and tried to rectify it as quickly as possible without also handing them a massive bill. And obviously, we spoke about animal intrusion in nesting. Again, I can't stress this enough. I know in the summertime, my biggest fear, well, not the summertime, but the springtime, is going out to the WMCA ATUs because inadvertently every year I miss a spot or those little carpenter bees. They get into places
Yeah.
and they find an opening, and I open up that door on ATU two. And you want to see me go running, do a 2 minute mile? Watch me see a
Mhm.
yellow jacket nest when you open the back of that door, or mud wasps. I'm like Carl Lewis. I got the fist bumping against my chest. I'm screaming down that catwalk, which then leads to another problem. I might trip over something and fall into the lagoon. And I don't think anybody wants to go into the lagoon over at 570. It's probably more dangerous in the water than it is out of the water there. There's multiple things in there that could kill you besides the Loch Ness monster of New Jersey that's in that water. Also the current and also just drowning. Not a good thing. So that's why, one can lead to another. One catastrophe can lead to an even bigger catastrophe that we're not even thinking about very quickly. And especially at water-based sites or sites that have unstable retaining walls, or one of these things where on the other backside of the site is a drop, a 30-foot drop that you're not aware of on the back of the building. If you're panicking or there's a problem and you have an immediate safety issue, this can turn into a real larger safety issue. I know I've been to a couple of sites that have they do have drop-offs, or there's a water feature right next to the site. So one suggestion I had heard from a senior engineer was throw a little of that yellow caution tape or maybe some orange flags on that side of the building or that side of the ATU or on that side of the tower to show a hazard. And this is one thing I did not put on here just because it slipped my mind. But let's also make sure at our sites that when you have transmission lines, especially at AM sites where you have that nice little piece of 3/4 inch or 1 inch that's going from the ATU to the antenna, that there is a piece of plastic protective sheathing at it. I did a site survey for Salem about 3 years ago for another station that will remain nameless out in the Meadowlands there. And when we got to tower number 5, I went to go reach up to what I thought was a brace bar, which was actually exposed copper that was running about 35,000 watts. And that would have been a really rough day. There was no guard on it, no pipe, but the other three had plastic guards on them. This one did not. So that almost became a very difficult day for me and for my loved ones. So that's just something that remember. And if you're not thinking about it, and I thought about it as my hand was moving in that direction, if you're not thinking about it, you too could become part of the scenery real fast. And I like being a part of radio. I don't want to be that intimate with AM. Now we want to talk about access and monitoring. Obviously, we create access plans. What if there's snow and ice? Maybe the road that you usually take, the back way up to the transmitter site, well, that's not the way you go. You take a different way, or you just plan to have one of those monster little tread machines or snowmobiles ready, or have a snowmobile company on tap, because you want to make sure you can get to the site if there's a catastrophe. Don't try to figure it out at 2 a.m. Call a couple of places. If there's a snowplow place, you got to have be preventative ahead of time. Or if you need an ATV or you're going to need that kind of machine, get the machine and have it put in a location that it could be. I know you deal with a couple of sites that are in places that you've said that you need a machine to get up to. So you want to make sure you have the phone number, you know where the guys are, and you have a backup guy or gal for the machine. Very important. Um, Look, we forget to plow our own driveways sometimes. If you have a site that requires plowing, and I know this from a landlord, I always have to make sure there's a plow company because my tenants seem to forget how to use a shovel. And this is something that happens when you rent. Suddenly you don't know how to do anything. You can't unclog a toilet or shovel the driveway or mow a lawn. You got to make sure your plow guy is doing his job. And if that means you got to drive out there and check just to make sure, well, that's part of the day. But you want to make sure that that driveway is plowed. And if you have a tenancy situation like we have at WMCA where we are subleasing the site, I might not need to get out there, but Jim Stagnito or Danny might need to get out there. And if I don't have that driveway plowed and they come out there for an emergency or just to do PM, I'm going to get a nasty phone call. And that means I'm not doing my job as a landlord for the company, as the representative or property manager for the company. So we're thinking about our own sites sometimes and our own access. We might have tenant access. This could be a site that has a cell tower on it that you're leasing, or it's a joint site that you're a part of. Make sure all that stuff's in place before the snow starts coming. And that brings me to my next point. You don't always have to drive out there. Webcams are so cheap these days that a $45 webcam can save you hundreds of dollars in gas tolls and potentially vehicular damage to check out something. I have a couple of cameras out at both sites. I don't tell anybody about them because then everybody's going to want to look at them. And and but sometimes it's better to not mention them. But I have a couple of cameras at both sites, primarily to see if there's intrusion by a human, if something has collapsed, if a tower light is out, or in the case of the NYM and MCA sites, if water is coming up to a level that could actually cause compromise the operation of the site. Luckily, we have not. I'm not going to say it anyway. I have cameras out there, so that will save you the trip. Sometimes, if an alarm goes off, door alarm, window alarm, or even any of the other many alarms that you might have out of the site. Could be a high water alarm, could be a fire alarm. Well, pulling up that camera is going to save you having to drive out there or calling the fire department, or the embarrassing thing when the police show up and it's just because of our friend the raccoon got in to the to the building and was walking back and forth and setting those motion alarms off. We had that happening at MCA for quite a while we dealt with the rodent or the vermin intrusion problem. I kept getting motion sensors, but I saw they weren't the front or rear door. It was just the interior motion sensor was going off. Well, something's got to be pretty big to set off a motion sensor. That's a raccoon. So that's how we kind of figured out what was going on there, in addition to our unexpected rendezvous. Now, this one seems like a no-brainer, but we can all admit we have not done this. Keep spare parts and basic tools on site. There's always that one tool that you brought with you that one time you happen to have in your car and you went, "Oh, I remembered I have this in the car and it's under the passenger seat. Oh, next time I come out here, I'll bring a spare with me." Don't make it next time. Make sure you do it like that time, or if you need to order it, put it on the to-do list, because the next time you go out there, you may not have that special Allen key that you happen to be lucky enough to have before, or maybe you didn't even realize you need. Sometimes it's good to just go through the motions of troubleshooting, even if you're not actually troubleshooting anything, to see what tools you're going to need at the site. Because it's going to be very difficult to find that tool at 2 o'clock in the morning, especially if it's during a catastrophic situation, such as a hurricane, snowstorm, windstorm. The hardware stores, Home Depot, everybody's closed. I mean, we all know what happened with Radio Shack. Since there's no more Radio Shack, I just keep boxes and boxes and boxes of cables and connectors around, and a soldering iron, just in case you need to make something. I think a lot of us have gotten to the habit of doing that because their local friendly Radio Shack isn't around anymore. So do the same thing with tools. You just don't know what you're going to need, and you don't want to go having to get up there and go, "Oh, I got to go back down the hill and go back over to the studio building or go to Home Depot," and it could be something you might just have in your car. And as part of this thing, I'm also going to recommend something else. Keep a few extra padlocks in the building, because that gate lock might freeze over. Even though you spend all this time jiggling it and smashing it to get the ice off of it, you know it's going to happen again. And if that lock is past end of life, or water's gotten into it, or the brass is all compromised, or things have warped inside the lock, it's much easier to go just program the new lock and slap it on the gate, send out a text and say, "Hey, landlord or fellow engineers, I replaced the lock." The lock's like, good lock is about $35, sometimes $45. It's going to save you hours of headache. Then you got to get the bolt cutters, or that's a whole nother road you don't want to go down. So a couple of spare padlocks have gotten me out of a few jams, and I only learned this trick because my predecessor at MCA, Stu Engelke, kept a box of padlocks at the transmitter site, and for years I couldn't figure out why, until he told me. Well, in case the lock freezes, you just slap another one on there. Hey, smart guy. That's what 40 years of the business and probably making that mistake will do to you. So thank you, Stu, for saving me time. And then here's just kind of a thing that I also like to do. I like to keep what I call non-native items, or things that you would not think to keep at the site, but what you might need. And this maybe not be spare parts, but fuel stabilizer, starter fluid, jumper cables. And maybe you need them for the site. Maybe you need them for your car. Maybe you just need to have something that you need to improvise with. And sometimes just having some chemical cleaner, some spray ether, some de-icer. The more options you have, as we all know as engineers, we can get pretty creative, but we're only as creative as the tools we have at our disposal. So part of that troubleshooting and problem solving process, and why the rest of the station staff goes, "Oh my God, you're so smart. You're like MacGyver." Well, it's because MacGyver was able to use what he had on hand to get himself out of jams, or in this case, maybe herself out of a jam. So let's make sure we have those extra things just in case we need them. Because it'd be a lot easier to just dump the stabilizer in and, hey, look at that. We have no more gel in our diesel. Then we got to go back out and get it. And then you don't want to go back because it's cold, and I'll do it next week. And then you forget about it. And then the generator doesn't work. And you could have just fixed it by dumping little stabilizer in the fuel, or the gas generator for that case. I know a lot of us have gas generators where we forget about them and the gas sits in them for years. WKZE came with a gas generator. I'm going to tell you something. That generator has not been started for about 4 years. So I lovingly say, well, we do have emergency power. It's never going to actually work, but we do have it. Yeah, it's great. So you got to go out and start that thing. And we know with gas doesn't last a whole long, like diesel, it doesn't last for years and years. It's going to turn to varnish. So those are all the things you got to remember while you're also trying to remember about making fun radio and all the other things that comes with it. Something I wanted to point out that the picture on the right is of an issue we recently had at WMCA, and this was something that we actually made an active effort to address before it got too cold. I'm happy to report this has been resolved. But despite all the best efforts of the engineering that went into the remediation of WMCA after Hurricane Sandy, as I'm sure everybody can imagine, the goal was to get the site back online and back up to a functional place as quickly as possible. Which I'm sure I was not part of this project. This was way before my time, but this is one of these things where the engineer does for the engineer ahead of them. I'm sure all the intentions were good, but it looks like on two of the ATU buildings, some of the galvanized metal that was used, the casings, might not have been tested properly. And over the last 8 or 9 years, due to the placement of the water and also the way that the grounding cabling was mounted, these galvanized sleeves were conducting electricity and corroding very quickly. Behind those sleeves was concrete that was also corroding very quickly because now the sleeve was compromised under the water line. And inside of that concrete was just a thin little steel spike going into the ground. Well, if it's on one pylon, I guess it's not a huge deal. You still want to deal with it. Well, this was on 60% of the pylons for one of the ATUs. So this was something that we only because we noticed it during the summertime when tides were low and we were out there enjoying a nice stroll on the catwalk. And I actually have to hand the notification to WMIC for this one. They were the ones that initially caught it because they were happy to be out there doing something else. We had enough time, a lead time, to put a comprehensive plan together. It was not an emergency repair. It was a planned repair, part of a capital project. Funds were allocated during the budgetary year. It was not an emergency, but we still treated it like it was. We treated it like it was a serious problem, and we didn't let it kick the can down the road. We took action immediately. And with the proper planning, that project still took about 18 months to complete. I'm happy to say the project is completed, and those pylons are now covered with concrete. Makes it look like like a Jersey barrier. Basically, that's the thickness of it. And those things aren't going anywhere. But again, if we hadn't seen it, when there's icing on the lagoon out at MCA, that ice could have gotten thick enough that it dislodged 5 or 6 of those pylons, and away goes the ATU, either taking a nice trip down the Hackensack River or just into the mud with all your expensive equipment, and everything else that's sitting in that building. So that was a conversation I did not want to have with my general manager, Jerry Crowley. I'd rather have the preventative conversation with him than the reactive conversation where I tell him it is now a $200,000 day, or maybe even more, $300,000, $400,000 day. So that's something we can see with just preventative maintenance. The easy ones: sagging guy wires, anchors, tower symmetry. I mean, do that while the weather's nice. I know at Hackensack we have a big field, and in nice warm weather, it's okay. There's it gets a lot of grass in it, it gets overgrown. You got to check for ticks and all that. But take a walk out there and go look at the anchors. It'll take you about an hour, but you go, you snap a couple of pictures for posterity and also the old CYA factor. Look, I did it. I documented it. Everything is fine. And then while you're out there, take a look at the guy wires. It's amazing how often we're out of sight because we're thinking about something else and we're not paying attention, and things can slip by us real fast. And the other thing about those funny little guy wires, when you have a 3 or 4 tower array, you might be looking at tower 1, and then you look at tower 2, and everything looks fine. And then you take a glance at tower 3, and you might miss the wires or the couplers, or the hardware on the rear side of the tower, the side that you're not looking at, or the one that's kind of in the corner of your eye. And you might not see that sagging guy wire, or if you don't go through the grass to check out the anchor, you might not notice that anchor is about to pull out of the concrete. And these are all things I've seen at sites, and if it's a site I'm in charge of, I take care of it immediately. But I've gone to sites and I've seen it happening, and you tell either the engineer, the people that are in charge, and they do nothing about it. And then 6 or 7 months later, you get a phone call because there's a problem with the tower, or like what Bud showed at the beginning of this presentation, and this becomes a very expensive day. And we don't want expensive days in radio. We have enough problems. We don't need to have issues like that. Foundational cracks for buildings. I mean, we don't think about how important that is because we're always worried about the antenna. We're worried about the electrical things. Take a little walk around the building and see if the foundation's cracking, if the building's shifting. I've seen buildings that are beginning to have, the foundation's collapsing, rocks and water are getting into the basement. Those rocks and water and pieces of concrete and sand, that's not going to go away by itself. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And one of these days, you have a big rainstorm, it floods the basement, floods the breaker box, the pumps don't work, and you again, this is going to create a lot of problems. And look, and here's something that I actually don't think about, and the only person that brought this to my attention actually was Bud. Years ago, we were at a site, and the studio building, the old studio building, was underneath the site. And I had asked Bud, "Well, why are they moving?" And Bud said, "Well, think about it. The tower gets ice on it. That ice can fall off the tower and plow through the roof of the building." And apparently, this had happened at this particular location. And luckily, nobody happened to be under that part of the roof when that icicle came screaming through it, because that could kill somebody. And you don't think about it when you're not looking up. I mean, think about how often we miss dust bunnies in the corners of our living room or bedroom, and suddenly there's cobwebs in the corner. You don't even, you notice it weeks later. Well, the same thing can happen with with something that's up or above you. You're not always thinking to look up. You're looking straight ahead. You're looking down, or you look up and the sun's in the way, you don't see it. Or if depending on the angle of the sun for the day, you're going to miss it because there's a shadow in front of what you're looking for. Or as Tim Braddock knows, there are things sometimes on the Empire State Building that you can't see because somebody's moved something in front of them on the roof, or you can't get out into the roof at that particular point, or it's too windy to get out on the roof. You don't realize that the VHF mast is starting to come off the side of the building, and two out of the three screws have corroded, and that this might become a harpoon for the people on the observation deck below or down on the street. We don't want that. That's going to be not going to be a very good look for us. Nobody wants to get stabbed with a 4 foot, PVC antenna. That's going to ruin their trip to Radio City and seeing the Rockettes. Now, moving on here. Why won't my? There we go. Uh, okay, environmental readiness. Now, we think about people. People are just as much of a problem to technical locations as the equipment itself and weather conditions. So we have to always think about what the people issues the people could create, and also what environmental conditions the people are expecting. I'm sure we've all worked in offices where the temperature is either too hot or too cold for individual staff members. And we all know about the staff members that come in, it's usually the sales department. They come in, it's too cold in the building. So they have a space heater with them and they plug it into the power strip under their desk. Oh, yes. And then a week later, the computer doesn't work anymore. And it's because the power strip is shorted out. Or the power strip fries and the smoke alarm goes off, all because of that pesky little space heater. And unfortunately, there's nothing we're going to be able to do to keep everybody feeling comfortable at the same temperature. That's just never going to happen. So it's good to look out for those things and maybe develop an alternative. Maybe you don't want to plug the space heater into the power strip, but if you really are cold and everybody's cold, maybe get the landlord to turn the heat up just a tad. Or if you do need to, you really need to use a space heater, let's at least get one that's certified and safe and not something you bought at Dollar General, but something that's really low amperage and designed for just a little near field, because people will bring in the strangest things from home. When you're home, you're looking for things that you want to have in your home. When you go to the office, you don't care. It's not your electric bill. It's not your, you need it now. So you'll take that GE space heater from 45 years ago out of the basement and you'll put it on your desk because I had it. I didn't want to pay for it. Well, guess what? That might start a fire. We don't want to have that. Um, One of the easiest ways to deal with thermal issues and HVAC, and we've been having a real tricky time with this at Salem, which we finally ended up having to just replace the HVAC system because it was over 20 years old and using old refrigerant was not replaceable anymore and was creating balance issues. And you would just bring in an HVAC company to balance and check your valves, check your pressure regulators on your radiators, make sure that things aren't if you're in a building with steam heat, things aren't running out of control. That's going to especially when heat sometimes doesn't turn off in the late spring or early summer. You're heating the inside of a building and you're cooling it at the same time. Now, I know my wife, Katie, loves to do that. She'll turn the heat on and then turn the air conditioning on because she's either too hot or too cold. And it's 70 degrees outside. I just tell her, open up a window. But that's not an acceptable solution. I think it just makes some people feel good to have the heat and AC on at the same time. But if you're paying the electric bill, that's not going to be a good thing. And it's also going to tax and cause stress on your system. And then when you really need your system the most, it's not going to work. Again, humidity, we know that's a killer. That creates lots of problems, especially inside in the wintertime. People are walking in from outside with snowy shoes, boots. There's a lot more condensation in the air. That humidity, even though we think it's on the floor, it's getting into the air and it's getting inside of our equipment. So you combine humidity and dust, and that makes for short circuits and clogged fans, stopped fans, all sorts of issues that we do not want to have to deal with. So if you can control the humidity in the building, that's going to give you a fighting chance against having bigger problems. Look, we want to also, again, just like outside, sometimes HVAC systems are located outside the building, on the roof of the building, behind the building. We don't want to have to go look at that in the snow. So we want to make sure that our heaters, our oil burners are cleaned. You don't want to have, if you have an oil burner, you don't want to have a puff back in the building. Nobody likes the smell of diesel, and it's amazing how simple oil burner maintenance goes unnoticed. People forget about it. Or did I just do that last year? And suddenly 4 years goes by, and you've got a tank full of unburnt diesel, and then that lights up and starts a fire, or just fills your office or your location with smoke. People can get sick. Diesel is toxic. You don't want people breathing in number two heating oil. It's really not a good look, and it also smells. To get that smell out, it's really bad. So a little basic HVAC maintenance will keep you in really good shape. Another thing people always forget to do is blow out their air conditioning condensers. Guess what? If you have a heat pump, just because it's wintertime doesn't mean that heat pump isn't still doing things. So make sure you get those fins clean, make sure the fans are working properly, make sure all the fans are working. Because just like in the summertime, when you want to move cold air in, you want to move the hot air out of the building. In the wintertime, you want to move the heat into the building and move the cold air out. It's the same principle, just moving cold air around. It's not heat, it's cold air. Or I'm sorry, you're moving heat in and out, not cold air. So that's what you want to definitely make sure you're doing. Also, backup heaters and fans. Not a bad thing to consider. I know as a landlord, I always have backup heaters and fans in case the tenants get cold and there's a real cold snap or I have a heating situation. Having a backup heater at a couple places in the office or just in a storage closet, if there's a real big problem and your heat system goes out, let's say the heat goes out but the generator's still working, at least you can get heat at a critical point. You might have a situation where you're snowed in the office and the heat doesn't work, and you've got staff members that are on site and the plow truck hasn't come yet, or they can't get out of the driveway, or the car, the rear wheel drive car doesn't work, and if there's a cold situation, well, this is a survival thing. So a couple of heaters and fans, just have them laying around, especially in the summertime. There's nothing better than a spare fan when you got a hot rack. Just throw the fan on there. Same goes for the wintertime. Again, spare parts of critical equipment. We know about this, but sometimes we forget. I know we've been in situations when a proprietary part that we've had fail on us, and then we've had it fail on us again a year or two later. Well, guess what? It's probably going to fail again. A lot of times they're from the same part series. Make sure you got two of those pesky cards ready to go. Those a couple of those parts you need for the transmitters. Guess what? Those vendors have those parts. They'll gladly sell you extras. So stock up on a few of them when you have a couple extra bucks in the budget. Leave them on the shelf. Whether it's a couple of display cards for computers, a couple extra mice and keyboards, an extra monitor or two. You don't want to not have it when you need it. All right, STLs. We always talk about the STLs. I'm a big STL guy. I like to have lots and lots of pathways in and out of places. Sometimes to my own fault, but when we have over the air STLs, we have to make sure we have to treat those like we're doing our same outdoor maintenance checklist because those are things that are on roofs. They're exposed to environmental conditions. Uh, Even if it's not a microwave link or a rooftop based situation or an environmental thing, our interior, or rather our conventional copper, fiber, and cable STLs, those are not impervious to problems. Just because it's exiting our building or it's supported by the cable company or the telephone company doesn't mean that we should not be paying attention to it. A coax line coming up into the building from the street, if we see it dragging, fraying, ripping, we notice it kind of coming off the pole. It's not going to get better with age. Same thing with fiber lines. I have a site out in central Jersey for Joe Piscopo, and we had the brilliant idea to get Joe Piscopo fiber service. And the fiber guy came out and said, Joe Piscopo lives at the end of a very long road, at the end of a very long driveway. And he said, guys, if I put the fiber up here with all these old, beautiful oak and maple trees that are past end of life, the next time we have a windstorm out here, those trees are going to fall on this delicate glass connector, and it's going to yank it out of the pole, and he'll be not have service. And it's going to take us a week or two to get up here. He goes, why don't you leave the DSL copper in place until you make it get rid of it because it has a big, thick protector around it, and even if something falls on it, it'll stay connected. Well, that's what we did. Sure enough, a week later, big windstorm came through, freak windstorm, blew down the trees. All the neighbors, their fiber lines got whacked out. They didn't have data for a week and a half, and Joe's little trusty DSL line kept chugging along. So just something to think about. Even though it's not our circuit for per se, if it's revenue generating and programmatical, it's carrying critical information, carrying telemetry, carrying program, carrying anything that we're going to need. Let's treat it like it's our own, even if it doesn't necessarily belong to us. Be the keeper. Backup servers. All right, we want to think about our backup servers because there's nothing worse then not checking your backup servers, and then your primary server goes down. And this could be for your file system, your automation system, your logger. I have gotten into practice because of the logging, the single point logging system that we've been using at one of the companies I work for, which will remain nameless. That's an IT managed service. Guess what? That computer recently, with all these updates and trend issues, has been very unreliable. So I've gotten into the habit of running 2 or 3 backup loggers just in case, because I've had situations where 2 out of the 3 backup loggers have gone down. It's been so bad that I'm actually thinking of putting a fourth one up, just because if somebody needs that audio and a client's asking for that audio, I don't want to tell them I don't have it. That's going to put me in a very unfortunate position. Same thing goes with your automation system. You might have your vendor backed up automation system, and they have an on-site backup, and then there's this little, Western Digital external hard drive, and that's the back. You know what? Make sure you got another one, and if you get an offsite backup at a different location and keep it on your company intranet, even better. That's even better, because then if something happens at the office and you can't get there, there's a fire, it gives you options. Even if you just pick up the machine and move it to another building, at least you have options. So, no, I think when it comes to our money makers, there's never, even two copies is not enough. Have a third, just in case. The miss list. Everybody has a miss list. Those that, oh, I'll do it next week. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, that's a minor thing. It's late. I got to go home. And in my case, it's dinner time and I don't want to be late again. So we have the list of things that keeps getting pushed down and down and down. Let's take care of the miss list before it gets too cold outside, because you don't want to be doing the miss unless it's something you could do inside and it's like one of those real snowy day tasks. There's those little things, spray painting that the bottom of the tower where it got messed up, making sure that the chain link on the fence at the site is starting to kind of come off, and yet you have it strapped together with wire ties. Oh, that plug you forgot to put the three pronger on, so you stuck a cheater on there, or that breaker that you've been meaning to replace. Go through the miscellaneous list, take a day or two, and just knock as much as you can off that, because the miscellaneous list can turn into a action items list real fast, depending what's on there. And sometimes we think things are okay, and they might be okay at the time, but then we have to go back through that list and see if we forgot something. I know that my miscellaneous list has burnt me more than once, and it's things that I said at the time were fine, and then a year went by and I forgot to take them off the list, and they became real problems. So we always want that. My final thing on environmental readiness are streaming encoders, because we don't always think about the encoders. And for terrestrial people that are trained with the on air, keeping the over the air signal is the priority, and the encoders are, well, if they're on, they're on. If they're not on, it's not a big deal. Our salespeople, especially at the companies I work for, are getting in the habit more and more of selling streaming only revenue, and a lot of the revenue is being offloaded to third party providers that are reselling your metrics and reselling your streaming revenue. And that, and we don't think about that. We want to protect air at all costs. So we might say, well, I have, 3 STLs going out to the transmitter site. And I've got 3 transmitters at $12,000 a piece. And I put these antenna switches in, and I have a backup Burke remote. And you list the 2 processors, and you list every single thing you've done to protect your transmitter. And I got this like Windows 98 machine running my web stream. We've all been there. Don't get burnt by your streaming encoder, because while you might not think it matters as much to the air, there might be somebody on the sales team that's billing $80,000 or $90,000 just on that web stream alone. And like with a company like Salem, which is selling digital more and more these days, I think their digital right now is actually outpacing the terrestrial in many of the markets. The streaming encoder, that is the transmitter. If you have a market that's 60 or 70% revenue based off of digital and 30% off the transmitter, I know we want to keep the transmitter on the air, and that's our baby, and we gotta do that. But the encoder might actually be making more money than the OTA. So we got to keep that in mind, that's only going to become more and more of an issue. So where at all possible, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of a hardware based solution. If you can dump the Windows machine and get something that like a streaming box, like a Telos R series streaming box, get that, because it's good. It's going to solve you a lot of problems later. No more Windows updates. Life is easy. Funny enough, I do not have one at Salem, but I have one at WKZ. That was probably the only piece of equipment that came with the station that didn't need to be replaced. And my goodness, it's a beautiful piece of equipment. Works great. That's what I thought about that. Now we know about static and humidity. This keeps coming back up. Obviously, and I just kind of threw this in here, the anti-static maps and wrist straps. You know that that's not practical in an emergency situation, but let's, a little thought at least to why it's important. and why we might want to discharge ourselves before we go charging into the back of a cabinet or into the back of a computer. We want to remember that. Dust, as we see on the right, is not your friend. We know that. Everybody here knows that we don't want dust, but yet there's always that one rack we don't get to. I'm guilty of it. I know a lot of other people are. The machine that's in the other office that, oh, I'll hit that next time. Or somebody from sales takes the shop vac home for the weekend because they want to clean out their car and they don't tell you. Where's my shop vac? Oh, Dave from sales borrowed it. And he's going to bring it back on Monday. Well, thanks, Dave from sales, but I can't vacuum out my computer. And then you forget about it, and then life goes on, and then suddenly your computer looks like this one right here. We don't want to have this, what we see in the picture. We want to make sure we get ahead of that. Dust is not our friend. Dust is not our friend. It is not our friend. It breaks, it causes lots and lots of problems. Not a good thing. Uh, while we're looking at the dust, there's another thing we often don't think about, and those are the power strips. Power strips have they have a lifespan on them just like everything else. When you put a power strip up behind a rack or under a cabinet, and for 15 years it sits there just being a power strip, well, hey, it's doing its job. But I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into, take apart a facility or add something to a facility, and there's that metal power strip from 1982 still sitting behind the rack, and it's all rotted out because it happens to be at the back of the rack that's facing the window or the back of the cabinet that's next to where the radiator is, and there's some moisture, very tiny bits of moisture coming out of the check valve, and we don't realize it. That power strip, if you take it up, the entire inside is all rotted out. That could start a fire. At the very least of our problems would be it just not functioning anymore and not making electricity. That could start a fire. That could burn down the office. That can kill somebody. We don't think about it because the power strips we put in, they just do their thing. Same goes for some of the DIY wiring we see. Oh, that engineer two generations of engineer ago, they made their own on-air light. And they used a homebrew box, but maybe they forgot to tie off the wire inside of that homebrew box. Well, you go charge it under the cabinet to look for something. You yank the wire out of the on-air light, and you inadvertently put 110 volts down the top of your hand while you're rooting around back there. We don't want that to happen. I got burnt by that at a transmitter site. Again, location will remain nameless, but I had a big burn mark on my hand right here, and you can still kind of see it. And that was just from reaching behind the rack, and somebody had made a homemade transfer switch out of some parts, some recycled parts. One of those parts came out, and I got hit with the hot leg of the box, and I almost blacked out and would have been just stuck back there, charging away. I'm not a Tesla, so we don't want to have that happen. Save that for electric cars. Again, fraying cables. A lot of times, the person before you uses that extension cord that is coming out of the head or the tail. And well, I need it, and I got to get this on the air, and I'll fix it next week. And then so and so forgets, and they retire, or they are no longer with the facility, or they get laid off, and that dangerous extension cord is still back there. And maybe you even noticed it once or twice, but we'll get around to it later. And then there's that one time where you got to go, get behind the thing. You can't see it, but you got to feel back with the back of your hand or the front of your hand, and you're reaching behind the rack, and that's an issue because that might be the time the cord comes apart. There you are holding two legs, maybe one in each finger or maybe one in each hand, and that's going right across your heart. So you can know that by just looking and taking the time to see what's actually in the rack, what's actually in the cabinet. Grab a flashlight and go pulling through there. I know that it could be a hassle sometimes to take the old wiring out. But you know what? If the wiring's not in use, get it out of there. Cut it, and oh God, we don't want to just cut the heads off, yank the wiring out, clear out the space. If it's a 30-year-old XLR cable, I think we're going to be okay without it. So just take the time to do that again while the weather's nice and there's no emergencies and studio conditions are temperate. Yeah, take a day and go and just pull the dead cable out of the bottom of the rack. The old sins of yesterday, let's not bring them into tomorrow. Because again, it's a safety issue. It also makes things neat and tidy, and it avoids dust. Backup systems. We touched on this before, but again, the studio, just like the transmitter site, and I see this. I think we see this even more at studios because of the dynamic usage, people turning on and off machines. Sometimes a person on this call who will remain nameless may plug a vacuum cleaner into a power strip connected to a UPS. Cody, you know what I'm talking about?
Busted.
And then that could take a studio down. So always know what's plugged into your UPS, and also know how your UPS is wired. So one thing I did see in the same studio where Cody was running his experiment with batteries and vacuum cleaners, I saw something that was from an engineer two to three generations before me. There was a UPS in the studio, a UPS in the control room. And instead of just moving the UPS to the control room that was in the studio, The engineer decided to run an extension cord through the under the floor into the control room because, well, the UPS in the control room had too much load on it. So I just ran a line to the UPS. Okay, guess what? The UPS in the studio blows up, and half the control room doesn't work. And then you got to play that game, which we call the game of power strips, where you got to go down the line of power strips and see which power strip tripped. And sometimes those power strips are visible, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes the power strip you see connects to a power strip in the floor that's gotten pulled under the retractable floor. And we don't want to play that game, especially in an emergency situation, especially when you're trying to talk somebody through doing this over the phone because you can't make it to the studio. So identify what's in your UPSs, what's necessary and actually critical, and what people just slapped on there. There might be things hanging on the UPS that you don't actually need. That extra flat screen TV for the talk show host that comes in once every 2 weeks that's hanging on your UPS. That is not a critical broadcast device. I'm sorry. Just because you want to have the New York City skyline behind you on the one day a month you Dwayne to come into the studio, I think that can survive a power outage. The stuff you want to have your UPS on your UPSs is the stuff that will keep you on the air. But I've seen all sorts of weird stuff plugged into UPSs. And then, of course, you'll have all this stuff that doesn't need to be plugged into the UPS, plugged into the UPS. And then there's that one critical switch that everything's jammed through, that one little 8-port Ethernet switch that carries everything, and that's plugged into a wall socket. So go figure. Let's not have those issues. Let's make sure we identify them again before cold weather and we can't get to the building. Rooftop generators and transfer switches at studios. This is something that gets overlooked a lot. We obsess over the transmitter sites, but then there's that diesel baby up on the roof of the building, and sometimes you just don't want to go up there. Sometimes you got to take the elevator, then you got to walk up 3 flights of stairs, and you got to find Bart from the building engineering department who's got to put the chalk in the door, open the door to the roof, and he's not around. So I'll go up and check it next week. Don't forget about your rooftop generator, and definitely don't forget to get gas up there. We don't want to have that become a problem. And make sure you run those studio test cycles. Sometimes the studio test cycles are easy. There's a button right in master control. You can hit that generator. There's a status light. You hear the transfer switch click over, click. You know it did it. Other times, that generator test has to be done up on the roof. And again, you got to go find Bart from engineering with his 75 keys. And you know it's going to be an hour. And by the time you get up and down, and then it's gonna put a dent in your day. But don't ignore it, because when you do need that rooftop box, that unit has to fire off. You don't want your studios to lose power. That's not going to be good. And usually that's where the general manager is usually at the studio. General manager doesn't care how beautiful your transmitter site is. They're going to care when the lights in their office go out and they go, "What are we doing to fix this?" And you go, "We're not doing anything. I'm screwed." And you go back in your office. So and obviously the last thing is transfer switches. We all know that sometimes transfer switches don't actually transfer. So just because the generator starts up, we don't consider that to be the end of the generator test. We want to make sure that we actually hear that switch transfer over. We know that the light's on, the thing's making power. And, the best transfer test, honestly, is to, if you can actually kill the incoming main leg, then you know for sure. But do that at 2 in the morning in case that transfer switch isn't actually working. Because if you do take the station off the air, it's better to do it at 2 a.m. when you don't think anybody's going to be bothered too much by it. Now, let's talk about our staff. Okay. In the last couple of years, we have seen this in real time. COVID taught us a whole new way of broadcasting, and staff members, in many cases, are already used to this. However, they might not be prepared with the correct procedure and policy. A lot of times, as we all know, staff members and operations people do things that sometimes slip past the engineer. You put computers on the network that don't have antivirus on them, or you do that thing where you have one NIC card on the firewall, and then the person gets creative and puts the other NIC card on the modem, so it's seeing outside the universe or the firewall onto the internet. And well, it makes it easier for to log in because I don't have to use my VPN app, and I can get into my broadcast platform or get into my Microsoft Outlook in an emergency. Well, that's great. You've also just exposed your entire network and your $30,000 firewall to a very, very simple DDoS attack, or a very simple, blunt brute force attack. We don't want to have that. So you want to make sure your staff members that are doing remote operations are prepared for those crappy days, and they're using the correct access into the system. And also they have access into the building. Where's the hidden key? Who knows where the hidden key is? Who doesn't know where the hidden key is? Who's supposed to know? Who's supposed to know the alarm code? Who doesn't know the alarm code? These are all things that you may find out when you are not on site. The staff is not prepared to deal with. And Part of finding that is the updated staff phone and email list. How many times have we looked at that staff phone list and it's got, Margie from traffic who hasn't worked at the company since 2006, but she made really good cupcakes for the holiday party in 2005, which is why I remember her. Well, she doesn't work here anymore. Get her off the phone list. You don't need her cell phone. You don't need her home phone. What you do need are the 22-year-old junior employees you just signed up that are really eager to troubleshoot for you. You need their cell phone number and maybe even their Instagram handle, so you can hit them if their cell phone's not
Hmm.
on. If they're ignoring their cell phone calls, like many younger people do, they don't like talking on the phone. You could DM them on Instagram and be like, "Yo, call me back," and maybe that actually works sometimes. Also, your vendor list and your emergency contacts. Well, emergency contacts, we think about our own personal emergency contacts, but they're emergency contacts for your business. The HVAC company, the electrician, the plow guy. We talked about the ATV guy. You want to have all those numbers handy. The alarm company for when the alarm goes off by accident. The sheriff's department for when the alarm goes off. You have to call the sheriff's department before they come charging over to the Crown Castle site and they think you're trying to break in and steal copper. You might end up in the back of a police car by accident just because one of your staff members set the alarm off. They don't know how to deal with the sheriff's department. They don't know what to say. So you want to keep that emergency contact list with all the possible phone numbers on it that you would have to call in an emergency. And sometimes maybe even numbers you wouldn't think to call in an emergency. But there's all sorts of, maybe the sanitation company, if the trash might not be getting picked up or the wrong trash is getting picked up or things that just would be on there, you might need to pinch. I had somebody who had an emergency contact list included the local taxi company. I said, "Why do you have that on there?" He goes, "What happens if your car doesn't start? At least you have a cab company. We've made arrangements with them that they know who we are, and they'll come to the station and drive our employees home, and we have an account with them just in case." Say, "Hey, that's very thoughtful of you guys. That's very cool." Essentials. Hey, what happens if you get snowed in? Power goes out. You want flashlights, blankets, not to be used, of course, for your staff to take a nap under the table in the break room during regular hours. But if you get stuck there, that office couch could turn into, and we jokingly call it at Salem, the Hotel Crowley. If you just stay at the Hotel Crowley for a night or two, and there you go. It solves a problem. You don't have to worry about getting stuck on your way home, and you get a little extra manpower out of the whole thing. But never hurts to have that tucked in the closet somewhere, especially some granola bars or some emergency food, bottled water. You want to have that in a little place where it's not somebody's snack time, but this is where it is in case there's an emergency. You can't get in or out of the building. You're going to be good. During crisis, you want to encourage communication and safety check-ins. Just because the facility is up and running doesn't necessarily mean that everything is okay. A person at the studio may actually have a health issue. There's been, we all know of stories where people have gone into the radio station, and this happened about 2 years ago. A person went to the radio station to shovel snow off of the steps and had a medical issue, and that was his last engineering shift, and that was a horrible thing to have happen. So sometimes it's good to have a spotter with you. If you're doing something and you go into the studio during an emergency, and you might be doing some physical labor and it's cold outside, bring a friend with you. It's okay. Have somebody else be with you while you're doing that. Or you have to do something that's outside, that's in the snow. You don't want to get stuck 10 feet from the building and die looking at the building because you wanted to be a hero and take care of a problem. Don't be that person. Bring a friend, bring a spotter, make sure your cell phone's working, charge the battery before you go. And if you're not going to be on site and you have staff in the building, make sure they know how to reach you. And if they can't reach you, make sure they know how to reach somebody else. Make sure they know what to do in case they're trying to troubleshoot. I've seen people make attempts at doing things that could put themselves in harm's way or unnecessarily over-engineer something that actually creates more problems because they just didn't know who to talk to. And they'll actually end up creating more problems or inadvertently have a much bigger issue that could be a liability or a death. And we don't want to have that. And good communication and just making sure that there's somebody with a brain on the other end of that phone can prevent that. Going with that same thing, the studio hotline, we don't sometimes check it uh, until we need it. And those IP-based phones are really nice and they're handy and they can do a million things. You can transfer calls and pretend you have an office in Beijing and that's going to connect to your office in Rochester. But guess what? If you still have that nice, even if it's a virtual PBX or POTS line on a different circuit that's not with your phone system and that's on just that little old switch or the old single switch or single cable modem that just always works, make sure that works. Because more and more we're finding out those little cheap gateways, grand stream converters, things like that, they do need to be rebooted pretty frequently. So you don't want to have an issue and Person reaches for that red phone and there's no dial tone. That is not a situation we want to have. And this is kind of a silly one, but snow emergency routes. Keep a map because the public might need to know that. You might need to know that. You might not realize that Route 9 is the snow emergency route and Route 199 is not a snow emergency route. You may attempt to go somewhere where you're going to run into a big pile of snow. I've had this happen in Brooklyn, of all places, where I wasn't aware where the snow emergency route was. If I had gone 2 blocks over, it would have been fine. And meanwhile, my car got stuck, on Myrtle Avenue. I could have just gone up to Broadway. So it's good to know that. And also, listeners might call in. Viewers or listeners may call in and ask you those questions, but maybe they need to know. It would be good to have that information. So it's, again, something we don't think about. But snow emergency routes, there's signage on those for reasons. Station vehicles. And I'm going to pause here real quick because I have to plug my battery in real quick. But station vehicles, we don't ever think about the station vehicle. Station vehicle, well, guess what? If that's what you're driving to the emergency, just because you have an emergency at a location doesn't mean that you can't have an emergency on the way to the location. And your car might have all those things in it. You've got the toolkit that your wife gave you for Christmas, or you put in the car because you know you're going to need it. You've got that nice big tire iron and that nice big floor jack, and you've got all the right stuff in your personal vehicle. But then you jump in the station vehicle, and guess what? That stuff's not in there. I can't tell you how many times I've left emergency tools in the station vehicle. I go in and a staff member has taken them out and put them in their own garage because they were working on something, or they left them at the remote because they didn't know what it was, or it fell out of the car. Well, guess what? You want to make sure you check that station vehicle because that toolkit could save your life. That roll of duct tape when your radiator blows up and that rubber hose comes off in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, that could save your life. Tire chains, if you need them, make sure they're in there. A first aid kit, very handy. We all know why. One of my favorite things to have is a DC jumper pack. Not just because your battery's going to go dead, but those things are really handy. If you get one with an inverter built in, you can power up 110 devices on it. And if it's sitting in the station vehicle, hey, guess what? You can use it. And by the way, they make really good backup remote power supplies. If you get stuck doing a remote in the field, you can plug your Comrex into them and power them up. But it's a really great piece of equipment to have because you can solve a lot of problems. You can plug a work light into it. Sometimes you even have a air compressor built in. That's a great Swiss Army knife that can really get you out of a jam. All of our hams that are on here, well, we know why you want to maybe throw one of those $49 Baofangs in a bag in the back of the trunk. Guess why? Because if your cell phone has no service, you still might be in the range of a repeater, and you can light that repeater up real quick. And if you're really stuck somewhere, or the car has gone off the road, or you got a flat tire, if you got no 911 service, hop on that repeater and call a ham. And guess what? All the hams know somebody will come and get you, or somebody will call emergency services to come get you. Hams are not going to let another ham sit out in the middle of nowhere and freeze to death. And I know of a couple of different situations that have been in the news where if that person had just a nice cheap two-way radio, a handheld HT, they would not have had issues. Somebody would have come, they would have found them, they would have gotten them home. Speaking of navigation, maps. I know we all know GPS. Our phone is so smart, it knows everything, it knows where we are. But then the phone doesn't get service and it can't pull the map up. And you don't know where you are, especially if it's for a site you're not familiar with or for an area you might have gotten lost in. Get that map out of the back, that nice Hagstrom map or even a county map. You can go figure out where you are. You drive around and find a couple of signs and you can triangulate your position. You don't have that map, you might be driving around for a while until you get out of the woods, and then you might be on the wrong side. So the map can really save you a lot of time, and in some cases even save your life. Again, flashlight. I can't say spare tire and tire jack enough. Those little crappy vehicles, especially the CRV that comes with AM 970, that's got that little scissor jack, right? We all know scissor jacks where you're trying to change your tire. What do they like to do? They like to fall over, especially if you're in a rush, you don't set them up the right way. And here comes the car, and the station vehicle falls on the jack, and then the jack's on the ground, and you're toast. Well, get one of those nice, $59 or $69 1.5-ton floor jacks from Home Depot. Comes in a case. And get one of those big lug wrenches. So you're not trying to do this with the little tire iron. You get the big butterfly wrench and you flip the thing off and you got the nice big jack. And guess what? Not only can you help yourself, but you might even be able to help another member of the station if they need their tire changed. Ooh, there's one in the station vehicle. Let me go get it. You've just solved the problem. As an engineer, congratulations. Obviously, case of water. And if you're in the cold, emergency blanket. Because guess what? If all else fails, you might have to spend the night in the car. And there's nothing worse when you forget the coat, you run into the car because you're in an emergency. Now the car doesn't work and you have no heat and you're on county route. I have no idea where I am and all else has failed and I forgot the jack and I forgot the spare tire. At least you got a blanket and you can make it through the night. Because if it's 20 degrees or 10 degrees in that car, you're going to freeze to death. So an emergency blanket could be one of those little space blankets or just, that crappy old bedding comforter that you have in the closet downstairs that you save for the guests that you really don't like. Throw that in the station vehicle. And if worse comes to worst, if a coworker brings a dog to work, they just got themselves a new doggy bed for the office. And then again, granola bars. Can't say that enough. A granola bar can really get you out of a jam. Good. Here we have our little readiness flow chart right here. Just a quick thing to glance at. Make sure you can hang this on the wall in the shop. You can hang this with master control. So you'll have all those things. It's an at a glance that can accompany our much more detailed checklist. But this might be a nice little descending order thing just to glance at real quick. Have I gone through all these things? Am I good to go? Is my staff prepped? Am I in good shape? There you go. Again, the community information desk, that was one that I got that from somebody else who I was talking to about this. But again, having a line that the public can call, it could be your station on-air line for your radio or TV station, that could be also forwarded through your PBX or your VoIP system to a couple of office desk sales phones. If the community needs information, if there's a crisis, the cell system is not working accurately, or you have the information that they need that they're not getting anywhere else, you could set up a quick community information desk, forward your earphones, put a couple of your people on it, and now you've become a hub for communication. And that can involve relaying information to the local police department, fire department, sheriff's office. You can become the center point for the communication. What does that do? Well, first of all, you're fulfilling your duties as a public service. The other thing is that this might be something that your viewers or listeners will remember down the line that, wait a minute, W so-and-so took care of me in the emergency. The Facebook didn't tell me about it. Instagram didn't tell me about it, but that nice DJ on the radio station told me about it. That nice newscaster mentioned it to me, and I was able to call the station. I was able to get information. First of all, you're doing great, public service. Second of all, I'm going to say one word: Marconi Award. So those are things to remember. In a time of crisis, your broadcaster can really provide service like no other entity can do it. The broadcaster has the ability to reach many people with one single transmission, as opposed to trying to reach many people using this very convoluted data system that we've kind of backed ourselves into. A radio is very simple. You turn it on and it works. Here, one frozen door, that could mean an hour or two off the air. That's why you have that can of de-icer you threw in the car, because we mentioned that. We're going to mention that on our checklist. De-icer can get a door open in about 30 seconds. You chipping away at it with a crowbar could mean $500 or $600 worth of damage to the door and the lock, and you're still not getting in. Anybody ever try to pick a medical lock? Not happening. Again, make sure, again, the fuel gelling might happen. It won't happen to you because you brought that extra stabilizer with you. You thought about this already. Static discharge, sometimes we don't think about it, but just discharging yourself before you go reaching behind that rack, you might not blow up your Comrex unit. We know about proactive maintenance means uninterrupted broadcasting. Lack of communication can mean no broadcast. Now, we're in the communications business. We want to communicate. We know about our takeaways. Again, just a quick recap of what we're doing here. My personal favorite on this is monitors and remote controls are your best friend. They really are. You don't have to go to the site. Look at the control. If your controls are reliable, this will save you a trip. It could just be a bad sensor as opposed to you actually being off the air. Your triangulation, your monitoring will tell you that. It could just be the raccoon and not somebody breaking into your tower site. I'll let the raccoon have a place for the weekend if it means I don't have to drive out to Kearney. As long as I know it's not the guy from down the street with his dumpster truck trying to take the copper ground radials out. The raccoon is not an emergency. The guy stealing the copper, that's an emergency. And you definitely don't want to find out about that in a snowstorm. I always, again, test all of this under load. Don't just turn it on, go, oh, it works, and turn it off. When you test it, turn that air conditioning up to max, turn that heating on to max, turn the power on the transmitter all the way up. Don't do it at night when the transmitter is running at 600 watts. Do it when the thing is at 50,000 watts and you're testing every single system, and you might even have the vacuum cleaner plugged into the UPS. Test it all at the same time. Go for the maximum load possible, because guess what? You might go, oh, it's working great. And then there's that other thing you forgot about, the de-icing unit up on the roof, or there's that floodlight with the two 2,000-watt light bulbs in it that wasn't on it that's going to push it over the edge, and you blow the whole thing up. And you don't want to blow it up. You don't want to go to the gym with that. I don't want to go to my gym with that. She's not going to like me. And again, my favorite one at the end: ask for help. It's okay. But we all know this one. I'm talking to a group of people who know the deal here. But I have no problem asking for help. Bud knows that, and that there's no issue with calling somebody else. Our goal in the SBE is working together to make each other better and lift each other up, not to be the best award-winning engineer possible. I think this group has made it very clear collaboration is key. So I know that I never have a problem calling anybody else, and I know that people on this thread do not have a problem calling me. So that one's kind of just more rhetorical than anything else. And my final thoughts, kind of all in the same theme here. I want to get back to putting the Christmas tree on the roof of the MCA building and not worrying about all this other stuff. So that's where my thoughts are right now. My winter prep, once this is all done, I want to get up on the roof and make sure all the 110,000 drivers on the New Jersey Turnpike are looking over at MCA and seeing Christmas lights and hearing holiday music, and I'm not thinking about why I was an idiot and took the station off the air. I want that MCA sign lit up by the middle of November so we can celebrate and enjoy, and then I go on vacation and I've done my job and we get ready for the spring. And here's my contact information, and here's our photograph from last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, with all our smiling faces and some very, very auspicious-looking engineering people from the SBE chapter in here on this shot. And that's all I got for you guys. So if I missed anything, now would be the time to remind me of my errors.
I think you covered a lot of ground, Andy.
Good.
And if anything, really, some of this is a refresher. I don't want to prolong this or anything, but the engineer, the role we have really is of a doctor. We are a doctor of broadcast equipment, audio equipment, studio equipment. We're really a doctor of common sense as well. It's the simplest things that will end up biting you. And that's what you want to look for all the time. Remember the scene in Home Alone where those guys are going downstairs, they're going to break in through the basement door. They take the axe down, they're banging on that door down there, and then they realize the door was unlocked. I use that story a lot because things are simple. Not everything is simple, but if there's anybody that's got something they want to add, Andy wanted to put together a checklist, like a winter checklist. But I think what we learned here is there could be more checklists. Checklists aren't bad. Checklists is to help you be better. I've got my planner here. I don't use it 100% the way I'm supposed to use it, but I use it enough to get by and to do what I need to do. If I didn't write things down, I wouldn't get them done. In the middle of the night, I'll email myself with something that I want to remember that I've got to do. So use those tools also to keep track of what you need to do. It's not bad to write a list and to document, and however you do it. Maybe you're not writing it. If it's in your phone, that's okay. And the other thing, Andy, that is very important is take pictures. I know when I'm at Empire and I'm out on the roof somewhere, I take pictures of like the WMIC 11 gig antennas. Every time I go up there, it's like, I'm going to go walk around on the other side. Let me go scope this, because it's not something that we get to every single week or every day or even every month. So I've got 3 sets of pictures to say, okay, yeah, things look good. It's holding together. The cables are tight. Everything looks good. Anyway, so if there's anybody that's got anything else to add to this, I encourage you, send an email. And Andy and Cody, and he's not on the meeting anymore. That just means that we can give him as secretary some things to do here. He can compile this list, this checklist, to make this look good. Anybody have any questions or any comments before we wrap?
No, I just want to say a terrific job. You can just tell that's the experience from the field. You look like a genius, or someone will say to you, it's maybe the younger generation, how'd you know that? And you know the hard way how you knew that. It could be the little thing, the screwdriver, name it.
This is
Yep.
what we call wisdom.
Yeah,
And
hard
any
learned.
engineer that has experienced this, and we learn more when something bad happens. And it's a note to self: I don't want this to happen, as Andy was talking about, and things cascade. It can happen, and especially for our students and our younger audience. You may think you're invincible, and you know what? In a way, you are. But sometimes stuff happens, and you want to be the better person and be better prepared. And if there's any takeaway, that's something that I think you will learn from this group and from our engineers and the other members of this group.
Yep.
So
Take a look at what went before you. Well, that's
there's a reason. A lot of times there's a reason. So
good job, all.
any other comments, questions?
I'm just going to add one thing I saw in the chat here that I meant to put on the slide and I didn't, but it's really important. And this is actually a lifesaver. Tell somebody when you're going to the site. Let somebody know. Put together a flight plan. Here's where I'm going. Here's where the route I'm taking. I do this with my wife all the time, especially if I'm going out in inclement weather. I say, listen, babe, if you don't hear from me in 3 or 4 hours, there's a problem. If you text me or you call me and I have not made contact with you, you might want to get worried. If it goes past 5 hours, come looking for me or call somebody at the station and tell them I'm
Hey,
missing.
get down.
Because I might be stuck outside the building
No.
and it could be a problem. You know, I could be
Excellent.
I could be 15 feet from survival and laying there with a broken leg and I'm dead, or I'm freezing to death. So let's not have that happen. And what made me think of it was that HBO series where the Heather Reed thing, where the guy was laying outside in the snow for 5 or 6 hours and nobody pretended that they knew he was there. I mean, somebody could have said something, and the guy would still be with us. So let's not have that happen. It could be such a and I've been in that situation where I've almost gotten stuck somewhere and gone, I never told anybody I was coming out here. Damn, that's not good. So you fall off a roof, you slip and you get hit by an ice chunk, get knocked out. Let somebody know; they'll come and find you.
The other thing is, Andy, you got to go charge your phone, and like, and I know, and I see this with my son, because and my wife will look at, on my iPhone, and it's like, you got to charge your phone. You're down to like 18% battery. Keep your phones charged, and especially for a younger group, share your location with somebody, and don't think don't look at it as somebody spying on you, but it may be something that does save your life. It's little things like this. We have that technology. If something happens, your phone is there pinging your location. That is very good. I had an instance one time when my wife, I knew she was coming back from Monticello to Middletown, New York, and she was taking some back roads that I grew up on, and believe me, I know the roads, middle of nowhere, in the woods, stuff like that. And there's no cell service up there. And after a while, I was ready to go and go try to find her, because it's like, wait a minute, her signal stopped here. And it turned out it must have been a cell site that was down, because as I'm pulling out the driveway, all of a sudden I can see her location, and she's just down the road. So these are some of the tools, guys. Communicate where you're going. If you're going somewhere, just let somebody know. Even write it down if you really don't have that, because this is how bad things happen to people, whether you're working on electronics or not. And Mike made a very good comment in the chat here. Your life isn't your life is more valuable than your employer, the radio station. I'm not saying you shouldn't give your best to your job, but respect life, and be safe. And that's very, very important. Think twice before you make a move, before you touch something. Um, if there's anything I can add, that's basically it. Use your common sense and ask questions. No question. This group will answer any question, and nobody's judging you. Well, except for Cody, because he plugged a vacuum cleaner into UPS. Don't do that. But now everybody knows that, and everybody's going to say, "Hey, I learned from Cody's mistake, where he did that," and it's going to stick in your mind now, right?
Right. We'll have to think about what's downstream of the outlet.
Any other thoughts, comments, anything to add from anybody in the group?
Well, no, it was good. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Any of the
I have,
Alex and the rest of your students there? You guys still in the room there or what?
I think they had to give up that classroom about 20 minutes ago.
I have
No,
one.
we're still here.
Yeah.
We're
Oh,
still
okay,
here.
you're still there. Good.
Yeah, at the TV station I worked at, I learned for transmitter sites on the way in, check the electrical feed from the power line, check the pole fuses, and make sure none of them are blown, because the site was wired up as a delta. So one fuse blows, it still works as an open delta, but one day 2 fuses were blown, and the site was down, and fortunately it only took about a half hour for the power company to get there and repair it. But I learned to, every time I'm out there, look at the pole fuses and make sure they're all engaged, they're all good.
Yeah, Paul, you make a very, very good point. And this is something, and Andy knows this too, because he's driven with me on, when I've gone to visit sites, you kind of get into a routine. And this is something else we could take up on when we talk about regular site inspections. When you're driving in, yes, you're looking at the power lines. Do they look good? And look at the phone lines. Are there any trees that are on the lines? Now, these are the things you look for. Again, you're a doctor. You're looking at all of the clues. You're looking at anything that can be a problem. But that you're right. What you talk about with one fuse going, you won't know about it until everything is off or the readings are so whacked out. So, but we'll that'll be the subject, the topic of another meeting. We could talk about, what to look for, how to be a good doctor. And it's not just, no, it's looking for the clues and preventing bad things from happening before they do happen. That's why we do the prep. That's why Andy wanted to do this. And I'm like, yeah, this is a great idea. It's timely. Let's talk about what we can do, because there's stuff I need to do in the next month at my sites.
One important safety tip I would mention: do not bypass the safeties, the interlocks on the transmitter. Too many engineers want to make their life a little easier, make the process go a little faster by bypassing the interlocks. Don't put your life at risk by doing that.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
And,
yep.
and even if there's interlocks involved, there's likely high voltage involved. And if there's high voltage involved, there should probably be another person with you. And that's just the way it is. I got to a point with DRE when we were doing high volt, and even with Seven Mountains, if a guy was going to do a tube change, I'd have somebody else with him as well. Wintertime, when we had to either walk up a site, up beacon or up overlook or something like that, I'd have 2 people go, and it was just for safety. And yeah, you get pushback from the client, from the radio station or TV station, but it's like, you know what, safety first. If you don't like it, we'll talk about that, but we're going to be safe while we do this. So, and some things wait till the next morning. If I had a problem late at night, it's raining, the weather's bad, and it's dark out, I may wait till the next morning before I drive up that mountain road that I haven't been up since it started raining, and who knows, maybe part of it washed out or a tree came down or something. We can go on this, but we shouldn't. So I think we've covered a lot. So
A great quote I heard from a chief engineer once: there are old transmitter engineers and there are bold transmitter engineers, but there are no old bold transmitter engineers.
yeah, well, look, everybody, this isn't all about transmitters either. This is a lot of common sense. Andy went through a lot of stuff in the studio and things like that. And this was really just meant to get everybody thinking about this. And hopefully you got something out of it. There are a couple of things I caught, a lot of stuff I've done over the years, a lot of stuff he and I have talked about. And you guys as well, you've experienced this, but sometimes we do need those reminders.
Hey,
And
Ricky, I see you're still on the call. You know, it'd be something you could do with your. By the way, Ricky, in addition to being our incredibly talented One World producer, who at his ripe young age is handling our flagship international talk show and doing a fantastic job. I mean, if anybody has had the opportunity to listen to One World or hasn't, you really should, because the topics that they're covering are timely, they're community based, and it's connecting radio from around the world and showing us just how small our world really is. One thing I've learned about working with the folks from Bush Radio is that radio people are radio people. It doesn't matter what country you're in or what market you're in. 7,500 miles away from here, they like the same things we do. They want to have fun, play music, entertain an audience, provide public service. And Ricky, I believe, is right in the midst of learning about that and really accelerating and making the show expand to other markets. And he's doing a killer job. What I'm thinking about, though, is Ricky, this could be something you could that information desk piece of this presentation we were talking about and the community connections in times of crisis. This might be something you want to take back to BFOA with you. That they might find some value in.
Right. The community connections. Well, I also wanted to say, because you brought it up, Andy, if I'm allowed. Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Ricky. I produce One Road on behalf of Andy at Hofstra University, but I also intern at the Broadcasters Foundation of America in the city, which is a nonprofit that provides financial support to people in broadcasting at times of need. And what we're working on right now is I Am a Broadcaster campaign. Andy sent me something for the video, but they want to represent engineers as well, the engineers from television and radio. So if anyone wants any more information about that, I'm going to put my email in the chat if you could get in touch with me about that. But that's also very good for me to take back to that, Andy. So thank you. And thank you for letting me say that piece. Thank
By
you.
the way, what Ricky's asking for is a short video clip. It will take you 30 seconds to do, and it will be featured nationally. What are they looking for, Ricky? Why don't you just tell everybody, because it's not that hard.
They're just looking for you to be like behind the board at whatever location that you're working and say, hi, I'm Bud Williamson. I'm the chief engineer of X, Y, and Z station, and I am a broadcaster. That's all they need you to say. That's it. And they want to feature all the engineers. So if anyone was interested, my email's there for more information.
Nice.
But thank you for letting me share. Yeah,
Nice.
thank you.
Thank you.
You know, Ricky, I'm going to, and for everybody, I will send a reminder email about NAB next week and make sure that's in there. I'm really hoping we have a good turnout there. I believe we will, because there's good stuff going on. And hey, when you can bring NAB to New York City, I mean, it's not Vegas, but it's New York. And well, except for Keith and except for a couple other people, you don't have to fly to get here. All right, Tim's got a 5-hour drive, but he'll do that to come to New York. Well, it doesn't take a lot of arm twisting to get Tim Braddock here. But I will put that info, Ricky, in that email.
Thank you, Bud.
Just, send me a reminder on that.
I will.
Because that's where it'll stick, and I'll pick up on it in the morning because I'm about ready to head on Julie time now. As you know, we've had a good learning experience tonight, and I hope this was good for everybody. Looking forward to next week. Keith, I don't remember. Are you coming in or?
No, I'll be there for Christmas, but I'm gonna miss the next week. But
so we have the date of December 4th.
Yes, thank you for that.
To be, I'm finalizing that now, but I've already spoken with them. We're all set.
Hey, Bud, the reception. What day was it again? Refresh my memory.
The reception.
When you guys are getting together, was it Wednesday or Thursday afterwards?
It's Wednesday. We're doing everything on Wednesday.
Guess I should know that, but I mentioned to Lee Harris that you guys are getting together and kind of invite him.
Yes. Maybe Lee Harris will make
he said he's going to stop by, and I'm trying to get some interesting guys out there. At least I told him I won't be there.
You know what? I thank you for the reminder. I need to talk to him anyway. But
perfect. Remind him of when you're going to get together too. I was making a note for myself so he's, if he doesn't have all day to
Yeah, he yes, and for him to see And I appreciate that Brian
He'll be there.
has stayed on with us from Cloud Junction. I think Lee is going to have a good takeaway. I was talking to him last week about Cloud Junction as well. And I think this is a tool that is going to be good for broadcasters as we move
Oh,
forward.
good, yeah.
Another business, another industry. So
Perfect.
okay. So hey, looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Hold on one second. Lori is saying something.
It's not a happy thing, but I was remembering in the early 80s, Herb was at HN Transmitter with two very experienced staffers. One went into cabinet, didn't realize it was live, was not, and Herb had to do CPR. It was too late. And every year on that anniversary, there was a case about that, et cetera. So safety first.
Yeah.
And that is very true. And Ricky, you do this too. Make sure, only because I see your face on the screen here, but all of our students, stay in touch, let people know what you're doing. So bad stuff like that doesn't happen, and just be smart. I don't know what happened at the HN site that night, that day, night, whatever. I wasn't there, but something happened that should not have happened. And
no, you don't want to witness it.
Yeah, that was
or
very
the aftermath.
preventable. So, that let's not have any more of that. Luckily, in most cases, I mean, we don't have high voltage like that in many places anymore. It's not like it used to be, Lori. So that's a good thing. Working on a 50 kilowatt transmitter you could still get bit, you could still get hurt. Working on a high power TV, you could still get hurt, you could still get bit, but it's harder to do that nowadays.
Oh, but on a happier thing regarding, since I was smiling about the raccoon, a cat adopted anybody who worked at the HN transmitter. She had her kittens there. She lived there. Everybody fed her. So sometimes, and she didn't disturb any of the equipment.
Well, that's good to hear. So, all right. So let's wrap up, guys. It's we haven't had a meeting this long, a virtual meeting this long, and I don't know how long, but thank you for hanging through it. Thank you for participating. Always, any questions, comments, reach out to Andy or myself or any of the other officers. We're here to help. We put in a lot of time into this chapter. Yes, it's volunteer time, but I can tell you it's very rewarding. And in our efforts and our mission to help younger students and you guys to embrace the industry and network and to be able to get a job in this network. Somebody did it for me a while ago, and this is our way of doing it back for you guys as well. So I hope you appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to SBE 15 New York City.